welcome to the morning show. We're coming to you today on WJOPLP Newburyport at FM 96.3 on Channel 9 and on Newburyport Community Media's YouTube channel at ncmhub.org. I'm your host, Mary Jacobsen, and today I'm happy to report we're going to be talking about a really important topic, light pollution and the dark skies movement to return our skies to darkness so we can see the stars again. And I have two perfect people here today to talk with me about that. Nancy Pau is here. She is a founding member of West Newbury Wild and Native and the wildlife biologist at Parker River National Wildlife Refuge. And we also have Madelyn Kaplin here. She is a biology technician at the Parker River National Wildlife Refuge. Nancy and Madelyn, first of all, welcome to the morning show, and thank you so much for taking time to be here to talk about this topic.
Thank you so much, Mary, and thank you for inviting us to talk about this.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Well, Madelyn, I'd like to start with you because I read a really interesting essay that you wrote that's titled The Value of a Dark Night Sky. It starts out imaginatively by asking us to visualize, if we could time travel, what the night sky would look like if we time traveled back 200 years. And so my first question is, and maybe you could put up the light pollution comparison photo up while we talk about what we'd be struck by if we were able to time travel back 200 years in contrast to what the sky looks like now.
Sure, totally. So I think it's a nice thought experiment, just because basically if we go back 200 years, that's going to put us before the advent of the electric light bulb. Yeah. So the way we would light our outdoor spaces back then would be only with candles or flame, and that's so much dimmer than the lights that we use today. So we wouldn't really have any of the same light pollution sources that we think of right now, or just any of the same outdoor lighting. So at that time, all of the skies across the world would be pretty dark at night, and so people would be used to just looking up and consistently on a clear night, they're always gonna have cloudy nights and stuff where you're not seeing as many stars, but on a clear night, being able to see the Milky Way all the time and a sky that's totally full of stars, and even being able to see like deep space objects like distant galaxies, the Andromeda galaxies that are visible to your naked eye, but not in a dimmer, more polluted sky. So I just feel like that thought experiment gives us a good look at sort of, now we're used to just in a typical sort of suburban or urban area looking up. You can maybe see the Big Dipper, you can see some stars on a clear night, but it's relatively few, like maybe fewer than a few hundred, and that's the normal. That's what we think of as just being a normal, like you might have a clearer night than others, but if you go back 200 years, a normal night would be looking up and seeing the Milky Way and a really, really bright star-studded sky, and so we kind of don't know what we're missing out on because we're very accustomed to like our regular sky, which is really much dimmer than it would have looked.
We don't know what we don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a big problem in so many aspects of life.
Yeah.
And I think that, when we hear the word pollution, most of us immediately think of air pollution or water pollution, the ones that we're most familiar with hearing about. But light pollution is a real thing. And I was wondering if you could just define light pollution for us and tell us how extensive the problem is.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's good to break down that term and think of it as a pollutant just like any other, but without thinking that we don't want any light outside ever. Like I definitely want to get home safe at night, and I don't want everything to be pitch black all the time, and no one in the dark skies movement is on that page either, but just thinking of light as a pollutant just like any other, where it's a good thing until it gets into places we don't want it to get to, or we're using it kind of thoughtlessly or carelessly and maybe in like excess levels. So just like nitrogen or something like that, which can become an environmental pollutant where like we need it to grow crops and it's really good for agriculture, but it only becomes like a pollutant when we're putting a ton of nitrogen fertilizer that gets washed off of agricultural fields, gets into waterways and causes eutrophication. So it's more about the pollutant gets into places it shouldn't be, or we're using it kind of carelessly. And that's the same thing with light, where light itself isn't the issue. It's just like how we're directing it and using it, and maybe using it in excess. But yeah, light pollution itself is the human-made alteration of outdoor light levels. So we've changed how light it is outside at night by a very drastic degree. And so there's a bunch of different sort of types of light pollution, like light trespassing into places that we don't want it to go. Like one thing that we typically think of is called sky glow. So that's like that diffuse glow over a really bright urban or suburban area that you can see like even from far away. So that's when the light that's getting shined upwards is getting like dispersed and scattered by clouds and in the atmosphere, and it creates this glow that like kind of remains at night. So yeah, you could get into all the specifics of other kinds of light pollution and stuff, but I feel like it's similar to like not knowing what you don't know. It's something we might not think about that much, but it is like a very, very widespread and common pollutant if we are going to start thinking about it as a pollutant. So, you know, most of us are experiencing, you know, light nighttime, not a pitch black nighttime. So basically in North America, about 80% of people, 4 out of 5 people don't see the Milky Way at night, you know, from where they are. And in the US and Europe, 99% of people are experiencing light pollution of some kind. So almost everyone, you know, there's a degree in there of how much darkness people are getting, but very few people are experiencing no light pollution at all.
Yeah, very few people. You know, it's a disturbing statistic. People may not even know the Milky Way is out there. We're part of it, part of this colossal kind of cosmos. So, and we're going to talk a little bit more later on about the loss to us of having the capacity to see those kinds of visions. But you make the point that all things in moderation, and light pollution has filtered out to affect the world in various ways. Because the electric light bulb, which is a large producer of light pollution, you know, it hasn't been with us for most of our history. So light pollution is not what we evolved to deal with. And that's the next thing I wanted to ask you about, Madeline, the impacts of light pollution disrupting our daily cycles, our circadian rhythms of light and dark, sleep and wake cycles. So first, let's talk about the impact of light pollution on human health and well-being. And then we'll go on to animals next.
Sure, totally. So it's definitely complicated, and I can't claim to be an expert on, you know, human health or anything, but like you said, basically, I think most of we do definitely know that that light pollution and exposure to light at night is impactful and harmful to human health, and there's like all these various mechanisms that can happen through, and I think it's still something that is still being studied because it is like a relatively recent phenomenon, and in terms of like the long-term effects, still figuring that out. And just because, you know, almost all of us are exposed to light at night in some capacity, even if it's just in our homes and the screens we're looking at night and stuff like that. So my understanding is that it can be hard to discern like a really direct causative link, but there's definitely a lot of associations that we find for sure. So, well, yeah, like you were saying, we've all, you know, for millennia evolved, and not just humans, but animals and plants too, have evolved with the 24-hour light-dark cycle. And so a lot of different organisms have evolved a clock, an internal clock that like keeps time and keeps link with that. So in our circadian clock, our internal rhythm, when we intake light through our eyes, through the photoreceptors in our eyes, then our body knows to produce all these hormones that help us feel alert and awake, like serotonin and stuff like that. And then when we stop getting light in those photoreceptors, it knows to turn on the production of melatonin and other hormones that help us feel sleepy at night. So definitely you could see how that would, if you're continuously getting a lot of light through your eyes, even when at night and no longer aligned with that 12-hour dark, 12-hour light cycle, your sleep could get impacted for sure.
It's like
that's the thing that comes to mind.
For a sleep disorder.
Exactly. So that's kind of the first thing that I think comes to mind for people, because for one, in a really light area, it might be hard. It just might be hard to fall asleep as is, let alone the effects on like your internal hormonal regulation and everything like that. But yeah, definitely over time, there's definitely evidence that it can lead to sleep disorder and just reduced quality of sleep and impaired functioning in the daytime because you're not getting good quality sleep and stuff like that. But I think maybe the more interesting, just because it's less obvious thing, is that our circadian rhythm affects a lot more. It's like it's not really just about the getting sleepy and staying awake. It affects a lot more within our body, and that's probably why there's all these other health effects that are so so related, and so melatonin is important in a lot of other things like immune function and cholesterol and brain patterns and stuff like that. So all those hormones are acting throughout our body, not just, they have a lot of function. They're not just making us sleepy, and just the circadian rhythm itself is linked to a bunch of patterns in the body, like your cell regulation and stuff like that. So then we have all these impacts where excessive exposure to light at night is also linked to things like obesity and mood disorders and even cancer. So there's definitely a lot that can be going on.
Yeah, in other words, everything is related to everything else. I think it was John Muir who said, pull one string and you find out it's connected to everything else. And so light pollution is like one string, and as you just illustrated beautifully, that string is connected to all the systems in our body, because we may study them in discrete ways, but they do not exist in isolation from one another. They're all connected.
Totally.
And anybody who's ever been insomniac for a single night knows how important a good night, not just a sleep is, but a good night's sleep. It restores the spirit and the soul and ready to do with the next day. So thank you for that.
Of course. And there is that's all out of all those associations, and there's definitely a strong association, I guess, with breast cancer that's been really thoroughly studied. So it's not a causation; it's this association that we see.
I know, but correlations are worth paying attention
yes,
to.
exactly. And then I think more and more in a lab setting, there's things that I've read where there is a causative relationship. In studies of a rodent or something that's exposed to light 24/7, they found that it is linked to basically producing tumors at a way higher level. So there does seem to be some kind of carcinogenic component, and sort of people that have to work on night shifts and stuff like that. There's a lot of study into if that can be considered a carcinogen, basically, because you're dysregulating. We're getting unbalanced from the internal clock, basically, and then like you're saying, it's also connected that has all these effects down the ladder.
Well, and I'm sure that the research is undergoing. They'll continue to figure this out. So, and I think Americans generally, we need the science before we take action, and so I think it's good to be paying attention to it. The correlations is where we begin, and then the causation studies can come after that. But so that's everything. That's a lot that happens with human beings. But, of course, we live with wildlife as well, because, as you were saying, they evolved with us. They're out there every night, every morning. They have the same skies over them. And so let's talk about how wildlife is being impacted by light pollution. Maybe you could give us some examples. I know bird migration is one of them. And Maeve, could you put up the bird migration flyer that we have? So people can see some of the dates where bird migration is impacted. So take it.
Sure. And it's happening right now, so perfect time to talk about it. Yeah, spring and fall migration is definitely a good time to be thinking about. As all these birds are moving north, they're moving south right now in the fall. It's definitely a good time to be thinking about that and talking about that. So I can start naming a few. There's so many different impacts, and it's interesting to see between different, kinds of animals and even plants and everything, insects. There's definitely impacts to all the light that we're putting out there at night, even after we're asleep or we're not using it, kind of thing. But so with birds specifically, we tend to think of them as being really impacted by the light that we're putting out at night, especially when they're migrating, because a lot of bird species are migrating, even if it's a shorter migration. Some of them are doing these huge, cross-Atlantic journeys, but even a lot of other species do more shorter distance migrations and stuff. But most of those migrants migrate at night for a variety of reasons. So they're not doing their migratory flight during the day. They want to go at night because there's fewer predators out there for them, and they're also using the stars and the light in the night sky to navigate, in addition to some other things like the tilt of the earth and magnetism and all that kind of stuff. And they also it's such an energetic flight, they're flapping the whole time, and so when it's cooler at night, that's kind of the time they want to go. So when they are leaving on those flights and it's really light in the sky that they're flying through, it can disrupt their view of the stars, which they're using to navigate, is one issue. And it's also that sky glow that we were talking about can actually like draw birds in, just like moths to a flame. They're kind of attracted to the light, and so there's all these studies that show from like 3 miles away, like a really bright urban center with a lot of sky glow above it can draw all of these migratory birds in that wouldn't normally go that way. They would just continue on their migratory journey, just keep going where they're trying to go, but they get drawn in to that bright light source, and then they end up in an urban environment that they wouldn't have otherwise been in, which is often not a good place for them because there's not a lot of food. There's a lot of predators like cats and coyotes and stuff like that, or raptors, and they also can become kind of entrapped by lights and so do sort of the same thing what you think of with moths to a flame, kind of circling and becoming disoriented and stuff like that. And then the big issue that we worry about is that if they are all drawn into a brightly lit, more urban place that they wouldn't have otherwise come to, is that they're at really high risk for just hitting buildings and windows, and that's like a really major source of mortality. So we might only see, like, we don't see it necessarily that often because either they're getting cleaned up or gobbled up by predators soon after, or they might, you know, survive the first impact and then move on somewhere else. But we think that is probably like one of the largest sources of mortality for birds in North America, if not the largest. So definitely being drawn into that brightly lit, more urban space with all these buildings that they're more likely to run into is a big issue for them.
Yeah, I'm sure they're thinking, you know, what happened to my planet? You know, it's supposed to be dark. There's supposed to be food sources. You know, what are these huge honking buildings here? So, and it's kind of heartbreaking, really, to think about the struggle that the night migrating birds are going through. And I've seen statistics in the past, I don't remember what they were, about speculating about the number of birds that do suffer and die each year. And it just breaks your heart. It's like a different kind of silent spring. It's like a silent migration. So anyway, light pollution is a problem for people and for wildlife.
And I would say that, you know, something that another species don't even migrate, it can have, light pollution can have impacted too. So if you think about fireflies, this summer was actually an amazing year for fireflies. I've heard reports from a lot of people that was like the best year ever for them, and they saw a lot of, you know, like in my backyard, I counted over 100 firefly glows like in a minute. So it's been amazing. But if you think about light pollution, you know, fireflies are glowing pretty dimly, and when it's too bright, they cannot communicate with each other. This is how males and females find each other, you know. So when they can't communicate, they just kind of give up, and they don't mate, and they don't, you know, reproduce. So, and I think that's something that, you know, as humans, you know, a lot of people enjoy the wildlife in their backyard, in their neighborhood, and I think a lot of people will kind of recognize that we don't see the fireflies like we used to, you know, when we were younger. So that's something that we're missing too, you know.
I mean, when I was a kid, this was in a small town in Michigan, and fireflies were a great highlight of summer nights, you know, because there were so many of them, and I don't know if we should have, but we would get jars.
You let them go afterwards.
We let them go afterwards, but it was great fun. And I did see a couple. Of course, I live now near here in Parker Ridge, and I saw a couple one night this summer, just a couple one night, and I hope they were dating. You know, but I don't know if their signaling was off, you know. So anyway, we can hope anyway. Well, you know, Nancy, I wanted to talk to you about it. I mean, light takes energy. We require electricity, and you know, we all are. You know, we've done a pretty good job, I think, of becoming aware of trying to make indoor lighting more efficient with LEDs and such, because it costs less and it uses much less energy. But how about the kind of outdoor lighting that is at the root cause of most light pollution? Is it done in efficient and cost-effective ways?
So there definitely, you know, I think the invention of LED lighting has been really good, kind of, you know, for environment. It's more efficient. We use less energy. It's actually better for the environment, its production and kind of the life cycle. But one of the main issues with the LED, especially LED in an outdoor setting, is that LED light tend to be more on the blue spectrum, so
Oh,
they
yeah.
more
The
are
famous
more
blue
similar
light.
to kind of daylight
Yeah.
versus the incandescents that we used to use are more kind of in the warmer
Yeah.
glow. So,
Softer,
and I think a lot
yeah.
of people kind of know that when
Yeah.
when we made the switch, a lot of people were like, "Ooh, I don't like this new light. It doesn't feel warm and
No,
cozy."
It feels like it glares.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but and Madelyn talks about the negative impact of light
Yeah.
at night, and one of the kind of other components is that blue light actually has a lot worse impact than warm light. So one of the nice things is that if you switch to warmer light temperature, you can actually reduce a lot of those impacts. And luckily, with the advanced technology, LEDs come in a lot of different options in
Yes.
color temperature. So actually, for example, if you go to your store to get a light, you have so many choices now. It's
Yes,
amazing.
you
It's
do.
almost overwhelming.
It is, yeah.
But if you read the labels, a lot of them have what's called color temperature in kelvins, and if you pick something that's 2700 or less, so it's also called soft white. That's
Yeah.
similar to what we used to get in
Yeah.
incandescent. So I'll bring it up.
Yeah.
But look for the 2700K, and then also look for dimmable lights, because LEDs are so much more efficient that
Yeah.
a 4-watt light will give you 40 watts of power, and it's actually a lot brighter. So if you can get dimmable lights, then you can actually dim it when you
Yeah.
don't need the brightness,
Right.
and then increase it when you do. So
Yeah.
that's another way that you can do that.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of options, and actually it's one of the reasons that we kind of wanted to do a campaign is that people can make a few switches and really kind of make a big difference in how their backyard and their community is lit at night.
Yeah. Well, related to that, Nancy, I know that your town of West Newbury has launched a Dark Skies campaign. Please tell us what you're doing in West Newbury, how you're trying to educate people about the kind of thing you were just talking about, and to engage them with, working on the problem.
Yeah. So West Newbury Wild Native, which is actually a community group, it actually has members from the greater Newburyport area. So we do have members from Newburyport, Georgetown, Haverhill, Amesbury. We kind of picked up on this, opportunity to keep our darker skies from
Yeah.
getting too bright.
Yeah.
We have this opportunity now because a lot of our communities still is dark in a lot of places, and particularly West Newbury. When I moved there about 10 years ago, one thing I noticed was that most houses don't have a lot of outdoor lighting. The street lights in West Newbury are actually spaced pretty far and uses kind of very warm, kind of yellowish light, so it's not very bright. So all the things, Madelyn talked about, the right kind of responsible lighting where it's providing safety, but also, minimizing those impacts. So as our towns kind of get more developed and there's more development and new people are coming in, we just want to raise the awareness that this is something that we can consciously do as we pick, the lighting for our both inside and outside our homes. And also if you're kind of renovating or if, people are building new houses, these are great opportunities to pick, just like you would design a kitchen, you can design your lighting to make sure that it gives you that wonderful warm glow that we all want from nighttime lighting without a lot of the impacts that, Madelyn was talking about.
Yeah. I wonder if you talk to people also about, like, some people have motion detectors for their light signs, because I think just reducing the amount of time that the lights are on at night is probably also an effective strategy.
Yes, definitely. So motion detectors is one way. The problem with motion detectors is that if an animal comes by, they will trigger the light, and that will cause. But that if that's something that is needed, that's fine. We do suggest that people put lights on timers or turn them off when it's not needed. So I think one of the graphics that we shared is actually the Unitarian Church in Newburyport. Madelyn gave a presentation there this spring, and after her presentation, they decided to dim their steeple light. And you can kind of see the difference of the normal light and what it looks like dim. And they are doing that, kind of at least 4 months out of the year during the migration, which is amazing. It's an amazing indication of how just a little change can have such a huge impact on our nighttime skies.
Yeah. Well, and I think the key there is helping people be aware that the problem exists. And then once people know it exists, there's goodwill there. And there are lots of things within the span of our control that we can do to get the right kind of light bulbs, to put them on timers or do something that just makes the skies darker. And so it's all good.
Yes.
Absolutely. And if you have a motion detector on and the raccoon comes along, it'll stay just long enough to disrupt your trash can and take the lid off, and then will disappear and it'll go back to being dark. Well, Madelyn, I wanted to ask you, at the national level, I've read about, this it sounds very interesting, dark sky reserves. And please tell us what these are and the impact they're having. And Maeve, if you could put up the dark sky scale image, so that will be on for a little while Madelyn's talking about what dark sky reserves are.
Absolutely. And really quick, I might sidetrack us also just to kind of go off of what Nancy was saying before we talk about the national level sort of things, but just also in terms of, as people and communities like West Newbury are thinking about how to encourage, responsible outdoor lighting and stuff, I also have found it really interesting to think and learn more about how, when we're talking about human well-being, which I think is, just getting people aware of the problem and how it also affects us. Just that, lighter places aren't safer necessarily, or just thinking that we want to design for visibility and, like Nancy was saying, like really design, so it's not just light everywhere so thoughtlessly. Like, we want to have visible outdoor spaces, especially places where we're going to use a lot at night and be outside and we want to be safe. But I think people tend to think that like having lights outside at night makes us safer, and there's really no scientific evidence that that's the case. And we tend to find that like wealthier communities are actually darker at night and they have that warm glow rather than that harsh like LED glow of like really bright overly lit places. And there's been really interesting research that sort of like that bright overlit area creates sort of a zone where everything outside of the lit path is now completely dark because you've lost your night vision because you're in a bright area, so it creates like a sense of no safety because you now cannot see anything outside of your lit surroundings.
It's counterintuitive.
It's
but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And just the glare of lights can even, sort of, you think of if a really bright car headlight comes on, with their brights on, you sort of lose your vision temporarily, and so that glare is dangerous. And so that's kind of what's happening to it. I just think, like, from a selfish perspective, like, I want to be safe.
We all become the classic deer in headlights.
Yeah, literally.
So, that's really interesting. I'm glad you added that.
Okay. Sorry to take us off track a little bit. But yes, going back to your actual question and the concept of reserves and stuff for the night sky. So just thinking of it as a resource that we want to protect, just like land and air, like you were saying. So the International Dark Sky Association is so I think it's IDA, and their name is also like Dark Sky now. I think they've changed it, but they're the organization that is that certifies international dark sky places. And so within that there's a bunch of categories. So there's dark sky reserves, there's dark sky sanctuaries, there's even like urban dark sky places. So there's a lot of different names, but basically all of those under that umbrella, they're all places that have committed to using responsible outdoor lighting and policy, and then they're trying to protect and preserve their skies in that area and sort of keep them for the enjoyment of people and sort of protect that resource into the future for future generations and everything like that. So the closest, there's over 200 that are certified in the world by the International Dark Sky Association of all those different kinds of places, including reserves. And so closest to us would be like up in Maine in Katahdin, Woods and Waters National Monument is a certified dark sky place. I think that one is actually a reserve. So so they follow those guidelines. They've been certified by that organization, and they try to promote their part of the world as like a place where you can go to see really, really dark and pretty unpolluted skies maybe for the first time. So kind
It
of
must be hugely popular with amateur astronomers.
I would think so,
Well, and I do think that places like that, the reserves, are really important for the rest of us. We talked about in the beginning about we don't know what we're missing.
Yes,
and I think
that's right.
for most of us,
Right.
we don't get to see a completely dark sky.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing
Yeah.
the Milky Way when I was younger because I lived in China, but I haven't seen the Milky Way since
Oh,
I've been like 10 years
interesting.
old.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's still in here,
Right,
but
right.
I like to see it again, you know, as an adult. But just like, you know, wilderness places and as places like
Yeah.
that set aside so that we can experience that, I
Yeah.
think the dog reserves,
Absolutely.
you know, it's an inspiration for the
Yeah.
rest of us to take those home to our communities
Yeah.
and try to preserve as much of it as we can't always
Yeah.
get there, but we can
But we
do
can
better.
find
we can
a
do
place
better.
on the scale
Yeah.
and try to move to the darker
Definitely.
end of the
Exactly.
scale that
Yeah.
people were looking at. Well, in fact, that's what I wanted to ask you about next, because I know lots of things are being done, clearly, and attention is being paid to, and that's all good. But I do understand the problem is still serious because our population keeps growing. And in tandem with that, more and more people are living in cities. I've seen the statistics about we're heading toward being a nearly total urban population. And with that comes the challenge of bright city lights. And I read that the number of stars visible in the night sky decreased between 7 and 10% each year from 2011 to 2022. And so what I wanted to ask both of you, and you started talking about this already, Nancy, but what are we missing, do you think, as a species, as individuals, as communities, when we look up at the night sky and we do not see a dazzling array of stars, but we see kind of a light fog? So
I'll have Madelyn start on this.
Okay, I'm sorry, but please take it away. But yeah, I think like both of us have been saying, just sort of the idea that it's really easy for that to feel totally normal, when in fact, if you go back or you go to a
Yeah.
different place where that's not
Yeah.
the same, like in those few places that, you know, not as many people live, but like you can see a beautiful bright Milky Way like every single night, because that is what is above us all the time.
Yes.
We just aren't seeing it. We're obscuring our own
Yeah.
view of it, basically. So it can be really easy to just feel like that's totally like the regular and normal. So sort of breaking that cycle. And
Yeah.
there's this concept of that being like a heritage that we want to pass on to future
Yeah.
generations, that ability to be able to see a really brilliant, like amazing, awe-inspiring night sky above us. As heritage that we pass on, like, you know, like we were saying, up until a few hundred years ago, you know, almost all of us were experiencing that every single night. And so when you think of the advent of like religion and the stars, so many things, aspects of many different religions that have to do with stars and the heavens and all that kind of stuff, and science, and art and literature, there's like, you know, the sky is a really huge component of all of those things going back into time. And also just the idea that having that view of really the universe, like being able to see our galaxy, other galaxies, stars, planets, that has, you know, helps us feel how small we are in all our universe. It's helped lead to all these scientific discoveries. So like there is some loss when it might be kind of intangible, but like if you grow up never ever being able to see that, you do lose out on something. So yeah, protecting those places where it is like still really extremely visible and can really be kind of like it can change how you really think about our place in the universe and that kind of thing. So that is something that a lot of us do want to protect now.
Yeah.
Once we think about it, we're like, oh yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's nothing like being under a dark sky. Even, you know, like here, it's, you know, we don't get kind of the Milky Way, but you can still go out to, like, for example, Plum Island, especially the Refuge portion, and you can get really dark skies. And there's nothing like, you know, dark skies with stars that makes us kind of think about our place in the universe, thinks
Yeah.
about our connection to
Yeah.
like everything else
Yeah.
in the world. And it gives us such a sense of solitude and peace. And I think we all need a little
Yeah.
bit more of that in our lives
Absolutely.
these days. You know, we need to take a
Absolutely.
breather,
Yeah.
and it's hard to do that,
Yeah.
you know, like
Yeah.
on the day-to-day basis. But if you can take the time to go someplace dark and just look up, you know, it kind of centers us and kind of brings us back. And I think that is something that we should all try to embrace and all
Yeah.
try to make more time for.
Yeah, you know, I totally agree with both of you. I think the last time that I saw a real night sky was a trip to the Southwest. And it was, we were, you know, doing a rafting down the San Juan River, looking at cliff dwelling sites. And so there weren't any street lights anywhere. But I remember looking up one night and going, holy cow, the sky is so bright naturally. the just vastness of all the stars. It was stunning to me because I'd forgotten. I mean, when I was a child, I remember being under night. Well, the skies weren't as bright then, and so it was just stunning. It was a revelation to me because it does evoke all the feeling of mystery of our place in the universe. And I used to study positive psychology, and there are researchers who've looked at the emotion of awe. And the positive impacts that the feeling of awe has on us. And there are a multitude of positive impacts. They make us more generous, kinder, all sorts of good things. But the phrase that comes up sometimes is it gives us a sense of self-transcendence. And the benefit of that is it seems kind of contradictory that something that makes you feel like it's a vast universe and I'm a tiny little person here on one planet, but it makes you feel expanded too, because it's my senses that I'm using to observe this vastness and I can participate in it that way. And I think the self-transcendence comes in. They've said that it makes people feel less lonely.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Because you're connected.
Because you're connected.
You're connected to all.
And so, hooray for dark skies.
Yeah.
Bring them on. Well, what resources would either of you recommend if people want to learn more now about dark skies and what they can do to help? Are there resources that you would recommend that people could seek out?
So there's luckily a lot of information on the internet, as you know, and it's almost overwhelming. But the Dark Skies International website is a really good place to start. In Wow and Native on our website, so it's wnwildnative.org, and you could just Google that too. Actually has a Dark Skies page, and on there it talks about why it's important, some of the things you can do, and a link to resources. One of the links is actually the town of Rockport has a really great 2-page guide. I love this of like what you can do. It's very simple.
Oh, excellent.
And the different, the bad type of lighting and the good type of lighting. So you can just go to that page.
So the town of Rockport. It
has,
good to know.
So we have that link too from our website. And then there's some programs coming up. I'll talk to one in a minute.
Yeah.
So at the Refuge and in Wow and Native, we're trying to just remind people how important dark skies are through kind of different kind of programming. And Madelyn talked about kind of the inspiration for artists. So on the Refuge, we're actually working with a local artist, Jan Hu, who is just finished a dark skies mural that glows in the dark. So she painted a mural of all the different species that dark skies is important to, important for migration. And we're actually having a program coming up on September 12th, so that's next Thursday. 7 o'clock.
A week from today?
Yeah.
7 o'clock?
It's actually kind of, Madelyn's going to be doing, she does an amazing presentation about all the things she's talked about with visuals, about why it's important. You get to meet the artist and her inspiration, see the mural when it glows in the dark, which is amazing. There's also a kind of art portion where you get to take home a glow-in-the-dark stepping stones. I believe that portion is full. The registration is full, but you can come to the presentation. You get to meet the artist and enjoy the mural. So,
wonderful.
And you don't have to register to do that.
And we've been working with Nancy and our visitor services manager Ella. Been working with the North Shore Astronomy Club for at least a year.
Actually, pre-pandemic. Yeah, the first program was
4+ years. Oh my God, that's awesome.
Okay, so it's been a few
because
years.
Plum Island is one of those really dark places where you can see the skies.
Totally.
That's great.
So many years. But so they come to the Refuge a few times a year to do to set up their telescopes, and they're all really amazing educators, and so that's a free
An amazing telescope.
which is really cool.
Better yet.
So they're all really great at telling us. Again, even though I've been to the program a few times, I'm always like, what is that one? What is this one again? But so they set up the telescopes at the Refuge at night, and it's a free program that anyone's welcome to come to. And all that information is on the Parker River National Wildlife Refuge website as well. But I think that's going to be October 24th this fall, and there's a rain date in case it gets rained out and everything. But I highly recommend that. It's really, really amazing. And we've been talking about these places that you can go and see really
Yes.
dark skies, but like comparatively, it's pretty good here. Like,
Yeah.
you know, even from close by, you can see there are definitely a lot of stars in the sky, and
Yeah.
and being out on the island really does make a difference. And even if you
Yeah.
don't go too far down the island, like you can see the glow of the Milky Way sometimes, and you can see planets and all these, especially with the telescopes. Obviously, it's amazing, but it's a great way to get connected.
Wonderful.
And I would say if you do find dark places in your town, like appreciate it and,
Yeah.
and give kudos to the people that are like
Yeah.
that are preserving those, and
Right.
educate your neighbors, and
Yeah.
try to protect the places we still do have,
Right, that's
because
right.
you know, if we
'em
don't, they
dark.
will disappear.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And Nancy, I think that there is a West Newbury Wild and Native event coming up.
Yeah, so,
people
yeah.
might be interested
Yeah, so-
in learning about that.
Yeah, so I haven't talked about this other group that I'm part of, but West Newbury Wild and Native, like I said, is a group of local citizens that kind of just want to promote native plants and kind of, you know, show people how to like control invasives and the dark skies. And we actually have a lot of programming, and all of it is free, you know. And coming up, it's on our website. Coming up, one of the things we want to encourage is recycling and reusing in
sure.
the town. West Newbury
Yeah.
is a green community, so this is our second annual town-wide yard and native plant sale.
Okay.
So if you know you live in West Newbury and you want to get rid of some stuff that you no longer need, you can go to the website and register as a seller. And if you're looking to kind of recycle or upcycle anything instead of going to the store for that, you can come check out the yard
There you
sale
go.
and see what you can pick up.
And when is that?
That is September 28th, I believe.
Okay.
It's a Sunday. Yeah.
Great. Wonderful. Sounds like a great event for anybody interested. So, excellent. Well, thank you both so much. I've learned so much. It's been really fun to talk to you. I've really enjoyed it. I really appreciate your knowledge and your willingness to share it on the morning show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
It's
Mary.
really been informative and fun. So thank you both for that.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today, everybody. Please join us again next Thursday at 9 for the morning show. Until then, everybody, be well.